My name is Ryan McSparran. I'm the owner at Budge's Wilderness Lodge. We're a remote lodge up in the Flat Tops Wilderness. I've been guiding wilderness fishing trips in the Flat Tops for about 15 years. But my love for wilderness fishing goes even way back further than that. I grew up here in Colorado and in a family that did a lot of camping and backpacking as a kid. And in fact, I caught my first trout on a fly rod. In the South Platte headwaters above Fairplay when I was like 8. Hello? Oh, thank you. I caught my first trout on the fly rod in the South Platte headwaters when I was 8 years old. And ever since then, I've just had love for exploring all the small creeks and alpine lakes and beaver ponds just all over our state. So much opportunity out there. And so, yeah, excited to talk about wilderness fishing tonight.
Hi, my name is Shannah Fedus, and I just wrapped up my 4th season guiding up at Budge's Wilderness Lodge.
Sure. Shannah's too modest to brag about herself, but when she's not guiding at Budge's Wilderness Lodge, she also guides for North Fork Ranch up near Bailey. She's a phenomenal fishing guide. She's wonderful with kids and families, and it's just a joy to get to work with her. So glad she could share this with us tonight and do some tiling too. So. So before I jump into just talking about wilderness fishing in general, I'll tell you a little bit about where we get to work up here in the Flat Tops. This is our little lodge out there. It's very remote. It's not the easiest place to get to. In fact, it requires driving on about 40 miles of dirt roads to get there, and some pretty rough ones at that. But it's worth the adventure. The other cool thing about this spot is it's been there for almost 100 years. This lodge and all the guest cabins, we have 7 guest cabins up there. Were built in the late 1920s. So it's just a cool piece of Colorado history. It was there long before the road was there, long before the Flat Tops Wilderness even existed. So it's a really privilege to get to be a part of that history up there. Now almost 100 years later, we're still taking people out on these wilderness adventures. So from the lodge, we go out on horseback and fish these remote wilderness waters. We do trips both sides of the lodge where we ride out, ride back each day. And then we also do some pack trips where we take folks out to remote camps and drop them off out in the middle of the wilderness. And that's a lot of fun too. So yeah, we enjoy doing all of it. Here tonight just to talk about wilderness fishing in general. And I think this is such a fun topic to talk about. Like I said, personally for me, it's a type of fishing that I've enjoyed since I was a little kid. But I think one of the things I enjoy the most about it is just the breadth of opportunity that's out there. I mean, all of our major headwater systems here in Colorado. You think about the Platte, the Arkansas, the Colorado, all these river systems have headwaters up there in the high country, and all these tributaries are just loaded with trout. And look at a map, and it's almost intimidating how much there is to explore. But I think that's the fun part about it too. So I guess one thing I'll start with is just what is wilderness. This is my daughter, by the way. Shameless plug for my kid there. This is on a trip we did earlier this summer up to the Holy Cross Wilderness area, fishing an alpine lake up there. If anybody's not familiar with what wilderness is, and that's wilderness with a capital W, an official designated wilderness area. The Wilderness Act was passed by Congress in 1964, and basically what that did set up a framework for protecting our country's wild roadless areas and then designating wilderness areas after that. So I think there were 50-some wilderness areas that were included in that original 64 Wilderness Act. And then there's been continually new areas added since then. Right here in Colorado, we have, I think it's 44 designated wilderness areas. So there's a huge amount of country that's locked into that congressionally designated wilderness system. And basically what that means when an area is designated wilderness, it's meant to preserve the primitive nature of the area. So no roads, no natives of any kind. When our crew goes out and clears trails each spring. We're not allowed to use chainsaws. We got to take hand saws out there. And no wheels, no bikes. So it's completely primitive, which is pretty neat. And one of the other cool things, just talking about wilderness areas in Colorado, is you've got your officially designated wilderness areas, but then we've got tons of wilderness country that's more like lowercase, W wilderness. Areas that lie outside those designated wilderness areas that just provide tons of opportunity as well. So I mean across federal public lands across Colorado. Yeah. So when you get to the end of the road and you start walking, you'll find some good fishing, and that's what we're excited about. So I guess I'll talk briefly just about, for me personally, how I find new areas to fish. And that's one of my favorite things about this type of fishing is just getting out there and finding stuff that's new. I've never fished before. So the first thing I do is I open up a digital mapping application like OnX, and you look here, just a small snapshot of Colorado. This is kind of an area around Lake Dillon. There's that big lake in the center. I mean, you can see just how many drainages there are that are probably worth exploring with a fly rod. I mean, there's so much water out there. So that's usually where I start when I want to explore something new. And then one of the cool things I like about digital mapping applications like this is, being able to drill down. And one of the things I often look for is areas on the map where those topo lines get a little further apart. And that typically means you're going to have a little bit lower gradient water, not quite as steep. And not that you can't find great fishing in some of those higher gradient sections, but typically when those topo lines start to spread out, it indicates, okay, it's going to be moving a little bit slower. Moving through some of those S turns, I'm going to find some good fishing in a spot like that. And then you can switch over to the satellite view, and you can kind of see this cool little meadow section of river you've got here. Turns and birds in the river. You're probably going to find some cut banks and some cool structure and stuff like that to fish. So when I'm looking at stuff, and I'm one of the nerds that I also tell you my real hobby is probably not actually fishing, it's just looking at maps. And I love finding new spots like this and just seeing all the great stuff there is out there to explore. Another great tool, thing about a tool like this is just being able to bring from a truck. So you can measure distance. So you can see on this particular section of river, we're looking at about a 2.5 mile hike and 400 feet of elevation gain. And just little things like that help you know what you're getting into and how to prepare when you're going out into a wild place like this. And then one more tool I'll mention real quick is Google Earth. We spend a lot of time just combing through Google Earth, finding new fishing spots like this too. It's amazing. Just with a 3D view, you can zoom in and really get a feel, even before you set foot in a new place, kind of what that terrain is going to look like and things like that. I'd be remiss if I talked about wilderness fishing and didn't give a quick plug for just safety and preparation too. This is something, of course, Shannah and I, especially when we're guiding out in the wilderness, think about a lot. Anytime you're going into a wild place like this, always get prepared. And just, a few things to think about, even if it's a place you've been before. Sometimes if we go to a place over and over, and it's easy to get complacent, but especially out in these wild areas, there's a lot of variables. Things change rapidly, weather changes rapidly. So, three things just safety-wise to mention. One, buddy. These kinds of experiences are great, shared with other people anyway, but also just makes them more safe. The second thing is be prepared for any weather. If you've been in Colorado for longer than about 10 minutes, you probably know that forecasts don't mean a whole lot, especially out in places like this. Things can change really quickly, so whenever you go somewhere, always be prepared for changes in weather. Come with a survival kit, a first aid kit, and know how to use them. It doesn't do you much good to have that first aid kit in your backpack if you have no idea how to use it. So just something to think about there. And one thing I always carry with me too is a satellite communication device like a Garmin InReach. And then a lot of cell phones now have the ability to text via satellite, so that's great and that's improving. But that inReach or that satellite communication device can be essential. Not only can I use it to text friends and family back home, but also you've got an SOS button on there. So if something bad does happen, you can hit that SOS button and it will connect you with search and rescue. And in fact, I've got a friend who had to use that SOS button once. He was backpacking here in the Flat Tops Wilderness. He was about 4 miles in, slipped on a rock and tore his patella tendon and couldn't walk. And that's the kind of stuff you don't plan for, but you have to be prepared for. And so just something to think about safety wise there. Yeah, with that, I'm going to give it to Shannah.
Cool. I'm going to talk a little bit about gear real quick. A little bit repetitive on what Ryan just touched base on, just safety wise. But really, I always carry a backpack with me back there. I know a lot of us are a fan of like the sling pack or the hip pack. Reality is you just cannot fit everything in there if you're me. I always like to bring in, all my gear, like my fire rod, my fire reel, my tippet, and all my flies. But beyond that, like an extra layer. Sunglasses, maybe I'll wear those in. The rain jacket, first aid kit, and knowing how to use that first aid kit is super important. And then just like kind of tactics wise. Flies that I like to use back in the wilderness, you can never go wrong with a dry dropper situation. In the spring, maybe not, maybe go a little bit more nymphic, but in the summer, the fall, the winter even, that lighter presentation and that lower water is going to get you down, going to get you in front of some of those fish that are looking up, but also looking just right forward. And then a couple of my favorite flies, just any stream when I'm in the backcountry, and ones that I love to use a lot up at budges. I'm a big fan of like a little micro chubby Chernobyl or like a little size 16 chubby. And my favorite colorway is the royal chubby Chernobyl. I feel like it gets it done in any cloud coverage situation, whether it be bright out or some clouds. And then dropping it down to something like I tied tonight, like a tungsten soft hackle pheasant tail, or maybe even like a copper john, or even like down to a leech. You'd be surprised how many of these little tiny fish in these little tiny waters will go after something quite large. It's crazy. But yeah, if I'm ever like in the middle of runoff, actually I'll switch that all over to a nymphig or even sometimes a streamer pattern. Some of these small little rivers get quite big in the spring and the like early runoff months. So that's when I'll size up to something a little bit bigger, a little bit flashier. Back to you.
All right. So when somebody says wilderness fishing, I'd be curious, we all can maybe shout it out, but what comes to your mind? What do you think of when you think of wilderness fishing? Just think about that for a second. Well, I think here in Colorado, a lot of times, maybe that brings to mind images of high alpine lakes like this one, or little creeks full of brook trout. And that certainly is the case in a lot of ways. There's so much of that here in the state, but I think one cool thing about wilderness fishing, especially here in a state like Colorado, is the opportunities are really extremely diverse. I think more diverse than most people often give it credit for. There's, in addition to alpine lakes, he's one of my buddies, Eddie. We're fishing the high alpine lake there. That's a beautiful cutthroat trout, and that's often I think the picture of wilderness fishing. Or a brookie like this one, a beautiful fish. But I think it's worth mentioning that the opportunities out there are even a lot more diverse than that. If you explore wilderness areas and roadless areas across Colorado, you'll find rainbow trout, whitefish, brown trout, lake trout. There's even places with goldens and grayling and all kinds of fun stuff. So, it's one of those things that makes this type of fishing exciting, and I think just more broad than people often give it credit for. Here's my son Noah, and this was earlier this summer. We found a high alpine lake with some lake trout in it, which was pretty darn fun. That's another friend of mine, Scott. He's holding a brown trout in one of Colorado's wilderness areas here. So it's not all just tumbling little creeks with brookies. There's a lot out there to explore, and it certainly worth getting out there. That said, though, I think sometimes I'll hear people say something like, "Ah, it's just a brook trout." And that always kind of gets me because that fish, I mean, it's spectacular. These little streams and these little fish they're so worth getting out there and enjoying because they're beautiful. And there's a lot of reasons to go out and enjoy wilderness fishing, and fish like this are certainly one of them. Other things I love about this kind of wilderness fishing, we're pretty cutthroat, up there from our neck of the woods in the flat tops. But it's I think one of the reasons I love this type of fishing though too is solitude. We can I'll of course go to more main stem river and stand shoulder to shoulder with somebody else and probably catch much bigger fish, which is fun too. I'm a equal opportunity fishing enjoyer. I like that. I like any kind of fishing. This kind of fishing, just being out there, finding some solitude. You might not see a single person all day on some of these streams, and I think that's one thing that makes it special. And then another thing, of course, is the scenery. You follow all these little blue lines on the map. They're going to take you to some pretty spectacular places sometimes. So that's worth it as well. Simplicity is another one I love about this kind of fishing. So there's something I think, especially after maybe you've had a day of tying nymph rigs and watching indicators, about just walking out with a white line rod and a pocket full of dry flies, and that's it. There's something to be said for that too. So I get excited about that. And then I guess another thing I'll mention that I really enjoy about this kind of fishing is, and Shannah can tell you this too, it's great for teaching new people how to fish. I spent a lot of time with my kids and new anglers out on water like this. And when you've got, reeling fish and a dry fly, and that's all you have to think about, it's a great way to introduce new anglers to the sport. And then I will say, on the other side of that coin too, there's plenty of opportunities to challenge yourself, in waters like this as well. High alpine lakes can be notoriously finicky. There'll be hot one day, and then the next day you're like just banging your head against the wall. And it's a good opportunity to try something new and different. Maybe throw in a slip indicator and try fishing a really deep rig in that lake, or do things you wouldn't normally do. Can really stretch yourself as an angler. On a little creek like this one, you'll see one of these cocktail rising under the bank with an overhanging rock, and you're trying to figure out how to zip the cast in there, and do a little aerial mend on there too, and try to get that little terrain around your dry flies and drag in the second it hits the water. Stuff like that, I think, is great to just stretch yourself as an angler as well. So, just because these fish are, and the streams are small, doesn't mean it's always easy either. And I guess I'll just wrap it up, and we can take if anybody has any questions. But just mention that from Cortez to Fort Collins and everywhere in between, there's just a ton of opportunity out there for this kind of fishing. So don't be afraid to open up a map and look and see what opportunities are out there and find something new and somewhere you've never been before. Take that light line rod of yours and a box of dry flies and have fun. Yeah, that's all I got. Yeah. Yeah, good question. So the question was, what does dispersed camping look like in wilderness areas? And really, the rule says you can't camp within, I think it's 100 feet of any body of water. Some bodies of water have special regulations, so sometimes you may need to look out for that. I can think of one lake in particular in the flat tops where I think they have a 500-yard rule, something like that. But I think normally 100 feet of water is good here. And fire need no trace principles. Leave a place better than you found it. And of course, pay attention to fire regulations and things like that. But outside of that, these wilderness areas are things that are in part of your grand western estates. So get out there and do it.
All
right. Most designated wilderness areas don't require permits, with a few exceptions. Rocky Mountain National Park, Indian Peaks. Yeah, there's a few more of the higher trafficked areas where you do need a permit in advance. But then a lot of these wilderness areas, especially the ones that don't get as much traffic, have a little registration box at the trailhead and you fill out your thing right there. And that's that. Yeah. Good question. So he asked, how do you know that little blue line on the map has fish in it? So, um, and I've been on the sad end of that story before. I've hiked all the way into a lake and found that there were no fish in it. Leeches and salamanders, but yeah, no fish. So yeah, I think that's just kind of part of the adventure. Sometimes is saying, hey, this looks pretty fishy. I'm going to go in there and check it out. And most of the time, I'd say these waters have fish in them. But yeah, there's sometimes where you'll strike out for sure. Oh, how do you know when it's iced off? Yeah, I've been on the poor receiving end of that trek too. Um, trial and error, I think. Yeah, especially with some of these high alpine lakes. And one of the tough things about that is it changes from year to year. And in our experience, where we operate up in the flat tops, there will be years. So our operating season is from the end of June through about the end of September. It's a pretty short window. There's some years where we can end of June, drive right in, no problem at all. And then there's some years where we're plowing through, 12-foot tall snow drifts to get in there. So it's, yes, sometimes one thing I often do is I pay attention to the USGS snowpack website indicators. And there's stations all around the state where you can where you can keep an eye on those snowpack conditions. And that'll kind of give you a rough idea of how fast snow is melting up there. Yeah, go ahead. What is it? Soar.earth. Okay. Cool. Oh, satellite imagery. Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay. Soar.earth for updated satellite images. That's cool. Is there a state where the resource technically which they're in there? So the question was if there's a resource out there to keep an eye on redfish in a body of water, yeah, what gets stocked by CPW, I guess. Yes, so Colorado Parks and Wildlife does have a fishing atlas, which is an online tool. It's a big map of the whole state, and there's little dots all over the map. And if you click on them, it'll open up a description of that body of water, what kind of fish you'll find there, recent stocking reports, things like that. And that can be really helpful, that Colorado Parks and Wildlife Fishing Atlas, for a lot of bodies of water in the state. And even some surprisingly small streams will sometimes have information on there. But a lot of these, especially these remote small waters, a lot of them aren't going to appear on that fishing atlas, but are still very much worth fishing. In fact, we've over the years come across little ponds and wilderness areas that don't even have names on the map that have fish in them. You would never even know until you walk past it, which is, I guess, part of the fun of exploring these types of areas too. Yeah, that has. I was fishing that one with my kids this summer. Yeah, that one's actually up in Buffalo Peaks Wilderness area. Yeah, yeah, beaver ponds can be a lot of fun, and one interesting thing about those is they change from year to year too. One of the spots we fish a lot has a brand new one this year that wasn't there last year. So stuff like that can be pretty cool too. Yeah, totally. Yep. Yeah, and I've also had beaver ponds. I've loved fishing in the past and have gone back one year and find that their runoff has blown them out and they're no longer there. So that happens too. Yeah. Yeah, good question. Wet wading. I'd say we wet wade.
Yeah, I meant to mention that it was in here, but it didn't come out of here. I love to have my waders on when I'm like trying to make sure that I have everything with me and I've got pockets for all of it because I don't use a chest pack. Maybe that's something that I should switch over to. But wet wading can be a great way to cool down and maybe like when you're at a high altitude, maybe just like a month or two of the season. But I tend to get cold quicker than others, so I think that's kind of dependent on everybody's like um threshold for temperature. But yeah, weathering is great, especially at the ledges. There's a lot of people that do that.
Yeah. Favorite what? Oh, favorite weight rod. I'd say probably I'd waffle between a 3 and a 4 weight. I've got a 2 weight that's a lot of fun until the wind starts blowing, and then it's worthless. And even the 3 weight sometimes, if it gets real windy, you're really gonna be fighting that thing. So sometimes that 4 weight is the nice middle ground there, somewhere in there probably. Yeah. What's that? Uh, yeah, eight and a half foot 4 weight, something like that can be really fun. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you guys. Thanks, John. Thank you. Thanks. All right, we good? We're doing a mic experiment this meeting. So, all right, Jerry, I gotta confess, I didn't bring my glasses. That's all right. I can read. All right, perfect. So, well, we'll start with the